I'm Liz Faublas, and this is Currents. Another challenge to the Obama administration's HHS mandate days before the government's law goes into effect. And a closer look at international agency aid to the church in need. Memorial crosses offer signs of solace and hope in Aurora, Colorado.
We as a nation are grieving here, but me coming from Illinois is just saying, you know, one guy coming and stopping what he's doing, going all the way out there, is really a picture of what the nation is suffering too.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. The Thomas More Law Center's motto is "Battle Ready to Defend America." Well, the national nonprofit public interest law firm aims to live up to that mantra. They too, along with U.S. Catholic bishops, dozens of other law firms, private institutions, and lawmakers, are challenging the Obama administration's health care law. Now, the firm has filed a lawsuit debating the constitutionality of the law's HHS mandate under the First Amendment rights to the free exercise of religion and free speech and the Establishment Clause. It also claims that the HHS mandate violates the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993 and the Administrative Procedure Act. Now, while this is not the first such lawsuit filed against the controversial contraception rule, it is, however, one that has taken such decisive action on behalf of its client mere days before the hotly debated law goes into effect. On August 1st, despite talk about safe harbors and religious exceptions, many businesses will be forced by the HHS mandate to start providing abortion-inducing drugs, sterilization, and contraception without copay to employees. Not to mention at least two other lawsuits challenging the law have had their cases dismissed on grounds that they have no case against the government. Still, the Thomas More Law Center is undeterred in its objective. I spoke earlier with Erin Mercino. She's the firm's associate counsel about the lawsuit, their client, and their long-term strategy to permanently block the implementation of this HHS mandate. Erin, your firm, the Thomas More Law Center, has filed an emergency motion asking a judge to stop the HHS mandate. Can you please explain exactly what that means, this sort of temporary restraining order?
Sure. What we're asking for is immediate action from the court to issue an injunction and say that the HHS mandate will not affect our clients as of the effective date of the mandate on August 1st, next week. So we really need for the court to step in at this time, otherwise our clients' constitutional rights are going to be violated. So that's the need for the emergency, is the call for immediate action.
Now, Erin, this month alone, as I'm sure you know, we saw what can be called two setbacks for firms and lawmakers challenging this law. Now, we saw the lawsuit filed by 7 attorneys general, which was dismissed by a Nebraska federal judge who actually said that the states failed to prove that they would suffer immediate harm once the part of the law is enacted. And then 2 days later, a federal judge dismissed Belmont Abbey College's suit against that mandate. Now, you don't think this sets a precedent we could see in the coming weeks and perhaps for your suit as well?
The thing is, our suit is entirely different. Our suit is brought by a private Catholic business owner, his company, and also a group of businessmen of which he belongs. It's a Catholic organization, the largest Catholic organization for businessmen in the country. There is no exemption whatsoever in the Affordable Health Care Act and the HHS mandate that would allow this man who holds Catholic beliefs not to violate his views. There is absolutely nothing in the law. When you look at the cases that have been dismissed, there, for instance, Belmont Abbey, there is a safe harbor provision that they will not be affected for an entire year. My client does not have that ability to not be affected. The law goes into effect for him next Wednesday. So it's very, very different. It's a totally different plaintiff than what the court has done with those two cases that have been dismissed. There is one other case brought by a businessman where there will be a decision rendered most likely either today or tomorrow on a temporary restraining order decision as well. So we will get more guidance perhaps in the next couple days, but the two cases that have been dismissed have nothing to do with what my client faces.
Erin, with regard to your client, how much in financial repercussions is he looking at if the judges fail to enact this temporary restraining order?
He's looking at if he tries to go forward with the insurance policy that he currently has. It's a self-insured policy. Then he's looking at, I believe it's $100 per employee per week, which would be quite expensive. He has over 170 employees.
And I want to make the case that it is these self-insured companies really that seem to be bearing the biggest brunt, or potentially the biggest brunt, of this part of the mandate.
It is. And at minimum, the minimum fee that he would see would be $2,000 per employee per year, and that would be if he decided not to insure employees, which is a very difficult decision for any businessman, especially someone such as my client who cares about his employees so much and wants to provide them with insurance. So you're looking at a minimum per year of at least, over $300,000 in fines.
Now, Erin, judges in the case that we were talking about earlier also noted that President Barack Obama's administration has agreed to work with religious groups and organizations to try to address their concerns. Are you aware of such negotiations other than the exemptions and the safe harbor?
I'm aware of the announcement that was made by HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius on the 20th of January, but that again was for nonprofit organizations that would be able to meet the guidelines of the narrow religious exemption.
Now, Richard,
so there's been no olive branch for private business owners.
And I also want to mention that Richard Thompson, your president and chief counsel, has said that, quote, the Obama administration deliberately declared war on the Catholic Church by promulgating this HHS mandate. Do you really believe that this is just against the Catholic Church, or do you see a bigger picture, and is that part of your argument?
Well, we know that before the final interim rule, the decision for the HHS mandate came out, that there were comments made that this truly has the potential of violating the constitutional and religious exercise rights for Catholics. There are exemptions made for individuals who are Amish and who are of the Islamic faith, people who object to any sort of insurance in its entirety. There is no exemption for someone of the Catholic faith or, most Christians. So there was some sort of decision made by the government on this, and they did have knowledge that this would affect specifically Catholics.
Erin, the law goes into effect on August 1st of this year. Worst case scenario, what happens if the law does go into effect? What is your strategy then?
Our strategy is to advise our clients of what the law is and what their decisions are and the ramifications of their decisions. What we're looking at is a choice. The federal government has put them in a box at that point. They can choose either to violate their deeply held religious beliefs, or they can choose to violate the federal law. That's all they're going to be able to do.
All right. Thank you so much, Erin. I have a feeling we're going to be talking a little bit more about this in the future, pros and cons, but I do appreciate your being with us here today. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And we will, of course, continue to follow the progress of this and other lawsuits still pending against the government's health care law. Stay tuned. The day's top headlines coming up next. Welcome back. In tonight's headlines, a call to halt Planned Parenthood funding. Pro-life groups are asking President Barack Obama to stop financing the group. This comes a week after a 24-year-old Chicago woman died following an abortion at a Planned Parenthood site. Operation Rescue released a statement about the incident saying that, quote, Friday's death is yet another reason why men and women of conscience across this nation cannot and will not comply with the forced funding of abortion and its intentional violation of religious liberties. Planned Parenthood receives nearly half its revenue from reimbursements and government grants. In related news, focusing on a potential link between suicide and abortion, a federal appeals court has upheld a South Dakota consent rule that requires doctors performing abortions to tell their patients about the increased risk of suicide. This ruling, which was made on Tuesday, is being praised by one of the state's pro-life counseling groups, Alpha Center. The center's president, Leslie Unruh, said that it's a victory for all women who have ever been deceived into thinking that aborting their unborn children was, quote, the only easy way out. And here in New York, an Ohio man on the run confesses to murder. Jonathan Smith walked up to a priest at a Midtown Manhattan church and told him that he had bludgeoned his girlfriend to death. He just grabbed a priest and said, "I want to tell you something," said another priest at the church, who asked to remain anonymous, according to the New York Post. His girlfriend, 48-year-old Darlene Hart, was found dead in their Columbus, Ohio home on July 14th. A fire had been set in an alleged attempt to destroy evidence. Smith drove to New York after the crime and stayed at a homeless shelter until Monday, when he came clean. On a brighter note, U.S. Cardinal James Stafford turns 80. Rome Reports has more.
On July 26th, American Cardinal James Francis Stafford turns 80, which means he'll no longer be able to vote in an eventual conclave. Cardinal Stafford is from Baltimore. In 1993, during World Youth Day, he was the Archbishop of Denver. Then in 1996, he moved to Rome after John Paul II asked him to lead the Pontifical Council for the laity. In 2003, he was appointed Major Penitentiary of the Apostolic Penitentiary. After his 80th birthday, the number of cardinal electors will be 120. There are 88 cardinals who cannot vote because they're 80 or older.
Elsewhere, protest against a new NBC television program. The New Normal features the story of a gay couple hiring a surrogate to have a baby. A group of concerned mothers called 1 Million Moms is speaking out against the series, which is scheduled to air in September. Quote, "It is the opposite of how families are designed and created. You cannot recreate the biological wheel," stated the organization. And finally, a sign of faith for the Olympic Games. Catholics in England have created an Olympic cross to help reach out to attendees and Olympians alike of the 2012 Games in London. As Christians, our lives mean nothing without the cross, and so this seemed to be the most suitable object to commission for ourselves and as a future gift to others, says the group. The cross will be erected at Joshua Camp. It's a Catholic gathering place in early August. The camp will help create a spiritual presence as well as provide hospitality. More currents coming up after this break. Coming up, we learn more about the mission of Aid to the Church in Need. Welcome back. A frequent guest on this show has been Ed Clancy, who directs the local office of Aid to the Church in Need. The group is an international agency, and Rome Reports has more about its work around the world.
Aid to the Church in Need is a Catholic charity and a pontifical foundation that works to help Christians that are persecuted throughout the world. One area they have been closely following is the Middle East, specifically the situation of Christians since the political revolutions brought by the Arab Spring of 2011.
The young people went out on the squares, but they weren't very organized politically, and so there was a power vacuum created by the fall of these regimes that have been filled by Islamic movements.
In 2011, Aid to the Church in Need took in just over $100 million according to their annual report. The majority of this money coming from individual donations. Where this money is then spent includes everything from construction projects, catechesis, to different forms of aid to Christians throughout the world. The donations help to fund more than 4,000 different projects in 145 countries. The majority of these projects take place in Africa and the Middle East.
We support small television stations and Christian radio. For example, with satellite TV, we transmit to the entire Arab world, including Farsi speakers, and it's actually something that's seen by many Muslims. So we contribute also by introducing some of the values and realities of Christianity to Muslims.
The foundation was originally created in 1947 by the Dutch priest Wernfried van Straten. It has worked for over 60 years to bring assistance to Christians that live in difficult situations.
And while aid to the church in need is working on the ground in lands ravaged by civil wars, the United Nations is trying to stop the massive flow of weapons into these trouble spots. Again, Rome Reports has the story.
When it comes to massive violence, the one common denominator is the use of weapons. So now the United Nations is trying to change that by enforcing stricter rules that limit the international transfer and sale of weapons.
Up to 2,000 people a day die from armed violence around the world, and that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the problems that the poorly regulated global trade in arms brings.
Supporters say, if approved, the treaty has the potential of changing the way the world deals with armed conflicts, and in doing so, saving millions of lives in the process. But basically, it's the world's superpowers that will have the last word.
The decision is in the White House with President Obama as to whether he will agree a golden rule in the treaty that will mandate governments to stop the transfer of arms if it's known or there's a substantial risk that arms are going to be used for war crimes or crimes against humanity, acts of genocide, or serious violations of human rights.
For now, the world's superpowers must agree on a treaty, but that's easier said than done. According to Brian Wood from Amnesty International, the United States is the largest weapons trading country in the world, followed by Russia, France, the UK, and Germany. There's also resistance from some Middle Eastern countries in approving this treaty. The deadline to actually come to an agreement is Friday, July 27th.
Stay tuned, there's more Currents ahead. In Memoriam, one artist's labor of love, hope, and faith.
This isn't about me. This is about me showing an act of kindness.
And finally tonight, you've probably seen those memorial crosses being erected in Aurora, Colorado to commemorate the victims of the tragic movie theater shootings of a week ago. Well, one man has been making those memorials for more than a decade and taking them where they're needed. Meet Greg Zanis from Aurora, Illinois, and hear why he had to make a special delivery to Aurora, Colorado.
Cutting out so it has a beautiful end on it instead of just a square end. These are basically 4 foot tall and 2 foot wide. I already got phone calls for 2 this morning, so I need to have these 2 made. People call me and I try to respond immediately. You know, I ask them, do you want a tall cross like this one here? Is the kind I dig in and put on the side of the road. This isn't about me. This is about me showing an act of kindness. Saturday, I made the crosses up in the morning, painted them. It took about 8 hours, including the painting. 16-hour drive, and it's 1,000 miles, and I think I made it in 12 hours. I know I was breaking the speed limit all the way through it. We, as a nation, are grieving here, but me coming from Illinois is just saying, you know, one guy coming and stopping what he's doing, going all the way out there, is really a picture of what the nation is suffering too. I cry a lot, and you know, it's not so much placing the crosses as when I actually start writing the names. It's my privilege to give, and there's no strings attached. It's the other way around. I'm offering the gift. You already got it. What are you going to pay for it later? You know, somebody asked me, how much do you charge for the crosses? I said, what are you talking about? I don't. Family members are going to be honored with these crosses, and they're going to see that, and they're going to see an outpouring. I understand thousands of people have been by these crosses already. I feel very much like Jesus did, you know, I'm ministering. I don't even have to talk. The crosses are a ministry. They're a prayer.
And that's it for tonight. Be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net, and you can also follow us on Twitter. Find us there at currentsny. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. As we await tomorrow's opening of the Olympic Games in London, we leave with some aerial views of the Athletes' Village. Thank you for watching, and have a good night.